With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN Daf Tzadik Zayin. Before we give an intro to today's class, going back to the sugya of tefillin, what I have to add and mention regarding women and tefillin is that there is a lo yilbash issue here as well. Actually, the earlier Rishonim speak a lot more about lo yilbash than about the guf naki. And all of that is linked to what we learned yesterday, that if a tefillin is a mitzvah say, she'ein azman gerama, and you're chayv to wear tefillin, also Shabbos is man tefillin and Laila is man tefillin, then there is obviously no lo yilbash issue. But if they are not obligated, since de facto men wear it and women don't, this also brings about a lo yilbash issue, which is also one of the reasons, as we quoted from the Ramah, that today we actually do and we should make a macha if women wear tefillin. Okay, we're going to come back to the Mishnah Chadoshois Yeshanois, the Mishnah of Hamoitzi Tefillin. We explained that people used to make kameyas, that they looked like tefillin, but the only thing they did not do to it is they did not make the ksharim under the tzuos as we do make it when we make tefillin. We're going to have a new understanding of Chadoshis and Yeshanois. We're going to go into the whole concept of Kesher Shel Tefillin is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. We're going to review the machlekes we have in Yevamos Daf Soid between Rebbe and Ashbag, whether a chazaka is affected when something is repeated 2 times, Shitas Rebbe versus Shitas Rashbag 3 times. We're going to clarify the machlekes we had in our Mishnah and Hamoitzi Tefillin. And that's Tzadikei between the Tanakama and Rab Shimon regarding one of the options of carrying the tefillin. So Rashbag says you pass it to your friend and your friend to a friend. But we're going to see pshat in the Tanakama that he subscribes to doing that not by passing it from one to the other, but the same person that found it should carry it, should walk and should stop and should go and should stop, all within Dalad Amis, which is also the same concept. You're not transferring it more than Dalad Amis. We're going to see why Rab Shimon finds that his option is superior, why the Chachamim, why the Tanakama holds that their option is superior. We're going to learn about the Shita of Rebbe Yehuda, that Mayim Ein Bohem Mamish, when it comes to an item being bound to the tchum of its owner, how this, according to Rebbe Yehuda, does not apply to water. And if we'll have time, God willing, we're going to start the new Mishnah on Daf Tzadik Zayin Omid Beis. That is also, it's going to be more of the same concept, that Isurei Derabanan are suspended when it comes to a tashmush of Kedusha that might not be treated with respect. So we are lenient. We are lenient by Dina Derabanan, and that's going to lead us into the whole sugya that Hoitza'ah is really only when you transfer the object in its entirety. That means all of the object is stationary. You make an akira, you make a hanacha, that was the act of Hoitza'ah. But if an object is, as we'll be learning, Hashgacha Pratis, for those of us who are learning Perek Echad LaRambam, we learned this actually now in the Rambam, that when you have a scroll and one part is in your hand, one part rolls out to another domain, bringing it back is not going to be an Isur Doiraisa because it was never in the other domain, because some of it was still by you. And a lot more. Chavra, we're going to start on Daf Tzadik Zayin, Amid Aleph, 4 lines from the top of the Amid. Shizvei, Itzvei is the mnemonic by the 2 dots. Baruch atah Adino Eloheinu Malachenu B'Shakalim Udvari. Amen. All right, says the Gemara. Again, everything that we learned, the sugya that we just had before, that Rava said that Tarach v'loi Tarach Tanoyehi, and when we quoted, not like we had in the Mishnah of Tzadikei, that the only tefillin that you are allowed to put on are tefillin that are Yeshanois. Chadoshois Patur. And when we learned the Mishnah, we said Chadoshois Patur means that therefore you may not wear it to take it back. And what we said pshat until now is that both Chadoshois and Yeshanois are tefillin that had straps in them. Both of them are unknotted. If they are Yeshanois, you can see the imprint of the kesher of the tefillin, which is the Daled by Tefillin Shel Roish, which is the Yud by Tefillin Shel Yad. By Yeshanois, you don't know whether they were ever knotted or not. Okay, and the machlek is between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, that Rabbi Meir says echad chadoshes ve'echad yeshanois. Rabbi Meir holds, you know why? Because people are not going to make a kameya that looks like a tefillin. So even though you can't see the knots, you can presume, because people are not going to be toireach that it was indeed a pair of tefillin. That is the way we learned until now. However, continues the Gemara, that v'hashda the Tani Avua the Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. Now that the father of Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yitzchak, taught the following Braisa, that gives a whole different pshat in Chadashis and Yeshanois, which is Eilhein Yeshanois. You know what Yeshanois means? It means Kol Sheyesh Bahen Ritzois Umikusharois. Yeshanois means tefillin, not only that have straps in them, but they are properly knotted. What's the proper knotting of the tefillin? So the shin has in the tefillin Shel Roish, the bias itself has a protruding shin. Really, there's a shin on the right, a shin on the left, a three-legged shin, a four-legged shin, v'chulei. But then you have the knot of the Shel Roish is a dalit, and the kesher of the yad is a yud. So that is Yeshanis. Chadashos means yesh bahen ritzuos v'loy mikusharos. And we understand from that Braisa that the whole question, and really the machlokes in the Braisa between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, udekula alma loy tarach inish, which actually will be a backup, if you remember, to the Shita of Rabbi Elazar, as also based on the Shita of the Braisa. This will completely reject the Svara of Rava. In other words, no one, unless you know otherwise, when you stam see tefillin, you don't have to be even afraid. Maybe it's a kameya, and a kameya may not be worn and carried because you're violating an Isur D'Rabbanan. But we don't have such a chashash. No one is going to be tarach. Even if it's not Mikushari. So the question is, so why would we not be allowed to do it? That's the whole point of this Braisa. That Chadashos means that it's not knotted. Now think about it, my friends. If you have a pair of tefillin that you're not allowed to carry, you're only wearing it derech malbish. So it's a tachshet with the entire sugya that we learned before. Or it's taka yechayiv to wear tefillin midoy raisa, it's only midrabanan. But now we're going to suspend the rabbanon. You can't carry it, you have to put it on you. How can you put tefillin on you if there isn't a knot? How are you going to put a tefillin shoraish on your head if there isn't the dalit behind it? How are you going to properly strap the tefillin shalyad? I know it's a little bit easier by the shalyad, but if you don't have a proper knot of the yud near the tefillin shalyad, that's the whole issue. So this really goes into the issue of making knots on Shabbos. It's completely not related to the pshat that we learned until now. So therefore, says the Gemara, hold on, and therefore you're telling me that the reason why Rabbi Yehuda will say that the Chadasha is asur is because you can't make a knot. So what? Frek the Gemara, ule invinu mi anaf, make a bow. Now really, as we'll point out in a moment, we already know from Masechta Shabbos that making a bow, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is also prohibited. Okay, so Omar Rab Chizda, so Meres, that aniva is psula b'tefillin. Really, this is a machlokes between Tanoim, whether making a bow is an isur or not. But obviously, this is going to be linked now to this machlokes over here. Abaya Omar, Abaya adds, Rabbi Yehuda l'taimei, the Omar aniva kshira, aniva is a kshira ma'al yisahi. As we have in, he's quoting over here, I think from Sukkah. Okay, as we have Shitas Rabbi Yehuda now, the Tosfos points out that Rab Chizda also knows that Shitas Rabbi Yehuda B'chlal is making a bow is like making a knot. However, the reason why Abaya didn't jump to say Rabbi Yehuda is l'taimei is because you can argue that since normally you make a proper keshet on the tefillin, you're only making this aniva bow in order to be able to transport it, so it won't be shal kal yama. So maybe a bow that's not shal kal yama should be mutter. That was Abaya's chiddush. So that was Rab Chizda. So Rab Chizda therefore didn't stam say Rabbi Yehuda l'taimei. He needed to add that even this type of aniva is also psul. Okay. Now the Gemara wants to know on Shitas Abaye. Tama, you Abaya saying that the reason why Rabbi Yehuda says in the Braisa, as we have in our Mishnah, that Chadashos is asur, is because the aniva kshira ma'al yosehi, which means halaf hachi, then on of you would be allowed to make a bow to rescue it. How would you b'chlal be allowed to make a bow when didn't we learn kesher shel tefillin halacha l'Moshe miSinai? This is very important. Now hold on. So what? You're not doing the mitzvah of tefillin, but we learned in the prior sugyas that the only way Chazal allows you to view putting on tefillin on Shabbos, that it's not carrying, is because it's derech malbish, and derech malbish, just like we had, it has to be b'makim tefillin. It has to be the way tefillin are worn. So if a bow is never acceptable as a kesher, so this is never the way it's worn, then you can't give the heter of derech malbish. So we're back to the question. And v'amar Rav Nachman, another detail of halacha l'Moshe Misinai, that vin noi ehen, its beauty has to be labar, the beauty of the knot. In other words, the knots have to be exactly the way we place them, which is, again, there's a dalid on the tefillin shel roish, there's a yud on the tefillin shel yad. So, and again, that's the question. If it's not derech malbush, which will be defined only the way it's worn for a mitzvah, then it should not be allowed. So the Gemara says, the anef lahu ke'en kshira didu, because there's a way of making a bow, which will be lit up made, or will be mutter by chadashes. You're not making a kesher, you're making a bow. However, and it's going to look just like the knot. It will be good enough to fulfill the halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Elamar Rabbi Yehuda l'shitasoi, as Abaye says, that holds that making a bow is like making a knot. Okay. Just to know that the Tosfos here, the second Tosfos, brings down that which we learned when we quoted this in the Nachas, Shitas Rabbeinu Elyahu, that says that the kesher has to be made every single day. There's a machlokes between Rishonim. We have the Rabbeinu Shimshon, that's not quoted over here, that makes a compromise. He holds that the Shel Roish is left fixed, which is the way we do it in Chabad, and the Tefillin Shel Yad, you should make the kesher every single day. So for those of us who wear Lubavitcher Tefillin, we know exactly what that means. How the part of the knot is untied, and then part of the knot is retied every single day. This is all based on the sheet of Rabbeinu Elyahu, which is also brewed down here on ERUVIN Daf Tzadik Zayin. Okay, so now that we are learning about tefillin, continues the Gemara. Amar Rab Chizda Amar Rav, halekeyach tefillin memisha eina mumcha. Really, lechatchila buy tefillin from an expert. But if you buy tefillin from someone who's not an expert, you may not put it on because maybe the person doesn't know how to write a pair of tefillin. So says Rav Chizda Amar Rav, boidik shtayim shel yad va'acha shel roish. You have to be boidik, either 2-hand tefillin and 1-hand tefillin, or shtayim shel roish va'acha shel yad. In other words, 3 tefillins have to be examined. Not only shel yad, not only shel roish, 2 and 1, any way you want to split it. Says the Gemara Mima Nafshach, you bought tefillin, memisha eina mumcha. What does that mean? It can mean you bought many tefillins from one person, or it can mean that you bought tefillin from many different people. And either way, l'chu'ura, what we're saying now should not help. If you bought it from one person, then why are we insisting you being boidik? Both yad and roish, why wouldn't 3 shal yad help? Why wouldn't 3 shal roish help? Live like a shalosh shal yad or shalosh shal roish. And mitrei gavra, mitrei or tolasa gavra zavin, but if you bought it from many people, then being boidik 3 or 4 would never be enough, because you would have to be boidik tefillin that came from another sofer. So kol chad v'chad l'boy bedika, every single one should have to be examined. Says the Gemara, obviously we're speaking here about mechad gavra zavin, and that's the vart that you can't say if you check the tefillin shel yad. 3 of them, this sofer knows what he's doing. No, because there are differences in the yad and the shel roish. He has to be authenticated in both. Chiddush is, you don't need 3 of each. You don't need 3 of yad and 3 of roish. Ubeinan, you need the mismachei b'shel yad v'shel roish. You have to authenticate that he's an expert in both. Elamah, the chiddush is, you only need a sum total of 3. But from the 3, 1 at least has to be shel yad, or 1 at least has to be shel roish. Says the Gemara, this is all Rab Chizda Amar Rav. So, fragt the Gemara, Ein Iva Hatana Rabba Bar Shmuel, that betfilin boidik shalosh shel yad, and or this shel roish. And l'chayra, doesn't that mean all 3 can be shel yad or all 3 can be shel roish? Not like at least this chumrah part that you have to have at least 1 of each. So the Gemara says no. That what the Braisa taught by Rabba Bar Shmuel is shalosh and mehen shel yad or mehen shel roish. Okay, I frag the Gemara v'hatani Rav Kahana learned the Braisa that betfilin boidik shtayim, which means shal yad v'shal roish, 2 is enough. So the Gemara says, good, that Braisa is authentic, and again, that Braisa is you bought many tefillin from a person. You only have to be boidik 1 and 1. Hamani Rebbehi, the Amar, that's Yevamis, the Machlekes in Yevamis Samach Dalet Soid and other places. How many times does something have to be repeated for you to have a chazaka? Shitas Rebbe is twice. Shitas Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, the Rashbag is 3 times. So this Braisa follows B'trei Zimna have a chazaka. Says the Gemara, Upa, let's continue quoting from the Braisa of Rav Kahana. L'chura doesn't fit. Rebbe, if that which Rav Kahana taught is based on Shitas Rebbe, look at the next line of the Braisa. Rav Kahana began telling you, Shtayim, Shal Yad v'Shal Roish, but then it says, V'chein b'tzeves, if you buy a whole group, if you buy a whole bundle, V'chein b'tzeves hasheni, you buy the second bundle, V'chein b'tzeves hashlishi, means from the first bundle, check 2, from the second bundle, check 2, and from the third bundle, check 2. Now again, did you buy them from the same person, from different people? Before we answer that question, if we are following Shitas Rebbe, and for some reason one bundle doesn't clarify for the other, so why 3 bundles? If they came from different soifers, then every bundle. If they came from the same bundle, Meila Rashbag, perfect, you need 3 times to make a chazaka. But if this Braisa, which only says 1 shal yad and 1 shal reish, is because it's following Shitas Rebbe, so when it comes to various bundles, 2 bundles should be just as good. From each bundle, yad reish, and you should be good, Shitas Rebbe. And that is where the Braisa ends. Mashma, that after you were boidik in 3 bundles, all the others can be assumed, written properly. The Rebbe, if the author of this Rav Kahana's Braisa is Rebbe, so Shlishi mi Islay, Rebbe wouldn't hold you have to be boidik anything 3 times, because 2 times for Rebbe is a chazaka. So the Gemara says, Umayde Rebbe, that bitzavasim, if you have bundles meaning that you bought each bundle from another sofer. So the fact that this sofer knows how to write it doesn't prove anything for the other sofer. The problem will be obvious. So why is 3 enough? We'll get to that in a moment. So therefore, Dimitrei or Tlasa Gavra Zovin, that's why it's not about establishing a chazaka. Each one has to be checked. And the Gemara says, indeed, that is the meaning of the Braisa. It's just to make it clear that even though this Braisa is Takarebi, and when you need a chazaka, twice is enough. For the Braisa to make it clear that the case of the bundles is a case where chazakas won't help, whether it's 2, whether it's 3, because you bought each bundle from another sefer. So la'afuke mechazake, to make it clear that this is not about a chazaka issue, because you bought it from different people. So from each bundle, you have to check how much. Let Rebbe 2, let Rashbag 3. And even according to Rebbe, 2 doesn't mean 2 shal yads. 2 doesn't mean 2 shal roishes. Everyone agrees to the principle that you have to make sure that the Sefer Sai knew how to properly prepare a shal yad and a tefillin shal roish. Elama, if you follow Rashbag, you have to have 3. And it doesn't have to be fear. It can be 2 of shal yad and 1 shal roish. It can be 2 of shal roish and 1 shal yad. Let me just finish on 2 that. What the Braisa really means is from every bundle, if there was a 4th one, you got to be boidik from the 4th one. Let Rebbe 2. If it was a 5th one, you have to be boidik from the 5th one. 2. Yeah, Shlomo.
If you buy one bundle from one sofer, like why would you need to be check you whatever you bought for yourself, and that's it?
No. Okay, Shlomo is asking, why am I mechuyev to check for another? Obviously, we're speaking about a retailer. Obviously, the retailer bought tefillin from a sofer. So how is he allowed to sell it if he doesn't know that the person from whom he bought it was a proper sofer? You should know that al pi ikar adin, when you buy a pair of tefillin, you can be soymech that it's kosher. Now, people who check it, that they're going beyond the letter of the law. There were certain poskim that actually did not appreciate the over-checking. Anyways, we definitely don't follow that shita. The Rebbe was very much into checking tefillin. The Rebbe told certain individuals that they should check the tefillin even when they buy it new. And many times you buy stam today, and it comes with a stempel. It comes from a beis din that it was checked over. And I know that a couple of years ago, when I bought a new pair of tefillin, Thank God I checked it here. Brand new, expensive pair of tefillin, and it wasn't kosher. Not b'di'evet, it wasn't kosher. Wow, these 1 in a million, but it happened. When it comes to checking, there's a big difference between the letter of the law and minhag Chabad that the Rebbe advocated based on certain poskim that we should check it. Now the Rebbe wants for us to check both the tefillin and the mezuzahs every Rosh Chodesh Elul. This is mamish beyond the letter of the law. You should know by the letter of the law, even though we know when it comes to mezuzahs twice in 7 years, al pi halacha, if the mezuzah is not open to the elements, it's not outdoors, and you have it in a box that does not even allow the mezuzah to rest on the wall where moisture might ruin it, many poskim say you never have to check it. Having said all that, we proudly stand with the banner of the Rebbe and we check our tefillin and mezuzahs ideally once a year and specifically in the month of Elul. Okay. Weiter. Now, we're going back to the Mishnah again on Daf Tzaddik in the bottom, the first Mishnah on Hamoitzi Tefillin. So it says in the bottom of the Amid that Metza'an Sivasim, that if you found tefillin tied in pairs, oy kerichas, or in bundles, so there the Mishnah says, Machshich aleim u'meviyam. Says v'chulei, says the Gemara, my tzivasim and my kerichas, it's like the same thing. Bundles, the point is that there's too many of them. So indeed, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, hein tzivasim, hein kerichas, it's not mamish the same, it's the same content. Tzivasim means tsuvei, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, tsuvei, or zivei, or zuvei. In other words, that you had them first tied in pairs. But there wasn't only many times when you buy now a new pair of tefillin, the shiyad and the shoroish, they're like bound together with the ritzuas. But there were many of them, and kerichos means that individually, one was not tied with the other, but the kerichan tuva, there is a huge bundle. The Nakuda is the same, is that when are you obligated Latanakama to wear it zug, and Lirab Shimon to wear it, and to Rabban Gamliel to wear it Shnayim. That's if you will accomplish bringing them all in before the Shabbos is out. But if there are so many of them, as the Gemara is going to say, that anyways, you're not going to save all of them. You're not going to remove them from the Rosh Hashanah until the end of the day. Then why do you have, which means you're mechuyev to go back and forth and back and forth. So if you anyways have to go back and forth, then don't take away the Rabbanan that normally would not allow you to wear tefillin on Shabbos. Anyways, you have to be there until the end of Shabbos. Wait over there. Machshech aleim u'meviyim. Ay va'amai la'aylinu zug. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak b'nei Rav Yehuda l'tedim mefarsh shelei minei da Abba. Abba means my father. Rabbi Yitzchak's father was Rav Yehuda. My father told me that since kol she'ila machniso zug, but you'll finish your job before shkia is good. Then machnisim zug. But if anyways you're not going to be done before it gets dark. So which means anyways you're occupied until the end of Shabbos, like we just explained. So therefore machshech aleim u'meviyim. What's the advantage of that? Because midrabanan you don't wear tefillin on Shabbos, whether it is because you might remove them and carry them, or b'chlal, we don't wear, whether Shabbos man tefillin, it's Isur D'Rabbanan. If Shabbos is Lav Zman tefillin, then b'chlal we don't wear tefillin, like people mentioned. There's a muktzah issue over here. I know that we waived the Rabbanans because of the Kedusha, but if it's not going to help anyways, then just wait over there. And then the Mishnah continues. U b'sakana. Now when we learned the Mishnah, we read the Rashi right in the Mishnah, U b'sakana. I think the sakana was on the base. Yeah. Rashi wrote Mipnei HaListim. Now we'll see this whole sugya. Sakana could be either from listim. Listim, you don't want to be in the street, and sakana can mean that there were times that the governments did not allow us to keep the mitzvahs, and some of them, especially the Romans, you were crucified. It was mamash capital punishments. So ubesakana mechason v'hoylach, cover them and go. We learned in another braisa, which is interestingly an option that was not at all mentioned in our Mishnah explicitly. So which one is it? You cover it, or do you yourself carry it? So Amarav loikasha. There are two types of sakonas. Ha b'sakonas nachri, ha b'sakonas listim. We have in Rashi two opposite pshatim. Let's go, I'm going to quote the second interpretation of Rashi. Rashi not here in Amud Aleph, but Rashi in Amud Beis gives the other way. And he says the first ha, the last line in the Amud, is our Mishnah. Our Mishnah speaking about Sakanas Nachri means that if you're going to be caught with tefillin, God forbid, they would put you to death. And therefore, there's a huge sakana of your life. So that's why the Mishnah says, cover it and go. In other words, what are you going to do? You're going to carry it? How is that going to help you? If they're going to chop you carrying the tefillin, you're also in danger. The Braisa that says you carry it is Sakanas Listim. Sakanas Listim is not as dangerous as Sakanas of the government. So therefore, don't cover it and go, but you yourself, and it helps you, because you know where there's a more danger? If there's a lot of bandits outside, don't hang out on the street. Now I know it's better to move quickly. Here you're stopping every 4 amas, but it's not as dangerous as, anyways, that's the second shot. That's the way we'll learn shot in the Gemara. Daf Tzadik Zayin, Amud Beis on top of the Amud. Omalei Abaye. Now this is very difficult. Why is that very difficult? Because if the answer was given by Rav, my friends Abaye Luchura never met Rav. Daf Tzadik Zayin Amud Beis. So whoever Abaye asked it to, Abaye asked him, but my oikim to lemas nisin. Again, our Mishnah is bisakanas oivdei gilulim. That's pshat government, and therefore it's so dangerous. Should cover it and leave. So then let's keep on reading our Mishnah. Ema Seifa, Rabbi Shimon Oimer, Noistan Lachaveira, Vechaveira Lachaveiroi. That's even worse than the Braisa. When I carry something, I have to stop every daladamas, or within daladamas. I know it's better to go quick, but it's only me. Once you have to get a whole group of people, can you imagine? And I pass it to you, and you pass it to you. So Kol Shchein the Afsha Milsom. This will attract a lot of attention. And if we are afraid of getting killed because we're keeping the mitzvahs, doesn't fit that our Mishnah should be. By the way, by listim it doesn't help that much. But you can argue also by listim that by listim are afraid of groups. But if our Mishnah is nachri or averes galulim, so therefore now it's gavaldik. Because of this kasha, the Gemara is going to stand with the answer. Our Mishnah is b'sakanas nachri. But now we're going to make a real machloikes between the Tanach that we never had until now and Rabbi Shimon. That you cover it and you leave. That's when the sakana is oivdei gilulim. But if it's sakanas listim, which is not as dangerous. So listen to this. Now we're adding words. So now actually our Tana holds that which the Braisa writes. Now you understand why there's a Braisa. The Braisa simply speaks out more details, right? That moilichan, that was the Braisa we had on Amud Aleph. That moilichan pachas midal adamas. So the Tanach holds, if there's listim, so then you don't want to go back and bring a zug or even to bring 2. You want to get out of there, okay? But work pachas midal dalad. On that, Rab Shimon says, and now we'll have to understand what's the underlying machloikas between the Tanach and Rab Shimon. Ubamaiko Mifligi explains the Gemara, Mar Sovar. Tanach holds that Pachus Ma'arba Amos Adif, that you carrying it less is better, because the Amrat Noistan Lachaveira, I get it, that listim are not as bad as the government. However, still, if you have to congregate many people, so Afsha Milsa, now Afsha Milsa doesn't mean Afsha Milsa for listim. Again, when there's a lot of people, the listim will stay away. But many people will notice that you're doing something that normally may not be done on Shabbos. You get it, Afsha Milsa, this Shabbos. Beautiful. Don't forget about this whole detail. Now, you're carrying tefillin, maybe people will notice that it's tefillin. Afsha Milsa, where did we have Afsha Milsa? If we had Afsha Milsa Masechta Shabbos when there's no Isur on my Shvisas Kalim. Halacha Lamais. No, I have to be shoyves. My avodim have to be shoyves. A Nachri cannot do work for me, but my Kalim can work. However, if my Kalim make a lot of noise, that's an Afsha Milsa. Then there's a problem on Shabbos. Even though there's no Isur, because it's like a Chilul Shabbos. So Afsha Milsa the Shabbos. That is the Tanach. However, Umar Sover Rab Shimon holds Nois Lachaveri Adev, because the Amrat Molichem Pachas Me'arba Ames. There's the fear. Fear is Zimnen the Lav Adaite. will you always stop? Let's say for Amos is 6 feet. What, you think you're always going to stop within 6 feet? Sometimes you won't. You'll take one extra foot. You'll take one extra step. So he never likes this option. Much better. No, we have to notify. Tell people that you're doing this because there was a whole bag of tefillin laying out there on the street.
Rabbi, just a quick question.
Yep.
Just trying to understand the machlokes that we're talking about right now with Reb Shimon and what we're calling the Tanakama.
Yep.
This Tanakama is not in our Mishnah.
Amazing. Chasure Mechsera.
So wait. So is that to understand that Reb Shimon and this Tanakama are not actually talking about the same situation?
That's correct.
As the original Reb Meir and Reb Gamliel in our Mishnah.
No. Sure they are. No. Sure they are. They're speaking about Hamoitzi tefillin. We're speaking about you find tefillin out there.
First we said that you put on one pair, you put on two pairs.
And then we said that you can't put on tefillas if there's a government. If there's a government fear, you can't put on the tefillin. If there's many tefillin.
So Reb Shimon always saying now does not argue at all with the first part of the Mishnah that if there's no fear, then Yitaka should just wear it and do what one of the first two opinions in the Mishnah.
100%, as long as you can get it in there before the end of Shabbos. Yeah, 100%. Yes, and if not, wait there, and if not, cover it and wait. And if you can't wait, why can't you wait? Because you're guarding tefillin. The government doesn't allow you to have tefillin. You don't want to be near tefillin in public guarding the tefillin. That's what we're talking. That's one thing. And then if it's mipnei alistim, correct. Exactly. Okay. Then the Mishnah says v'chein benoi my boy Hassan. Just technically, you have a child out there. How do you bring a child in? So the vei menashe tana. Yeah, the case was bishi yalada toy imay basada. Yeah, a baby was born out in the field, and you have to bring him. You have to bring him back. And if you look back in the Mishnah, on Daf Tzaddik Keyamid Beis, after we said benoi, right, v'chein benoi, that noisten lachaveroi, v'chaveroi lachaveroi. Here we add the words afilu meya. What's even 100 people? Umay afilu hein meya. Oh, now it fits. This is an infant. V'af al gab de kosher leyodem. You would argue, mainly when it comes to an inanimate thing, even when we're speaking about tefillin, it's holy, but it's not alive. The way a child is alive. So you can pass it to many people, according to Rab Shimon. A child, when people make a bris, and a gitar chayka and a chayka, you think it's easy for the child? It disturbs the child every time you pass him. So you would think that since the kosher le'yada, it's hard for the infant to be passed from hand to hand. So maybe even Rab Shimon will hold that don't pass him to 100 people, you carry the baby and stop less than daled amas. Afilu hachid, Rab Shimon holds that this is better. Like we said before, Rab Shimon is afraid that the moment a person himself will be carrying here the baby, they might at one time go more than the daled amas and violate Shabbos not midoiraisa, also very important. They'll violate Shabbos by the baby chay noisas atzmai, but they'll be violating Shabbos midrabanan. All right, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, unlike the Tanakama, unlike Rab Shimon, that they were only allowing you to set it because there is a need. He says, no, noisan adam chavis. Even if you have a barrel, there's no tzoyrach, there's no bizayin, there's no baby. This concept, let's go back to Rab Shimon, of chavere la chavere, chavere la chavere, you can do that even for a barrel. And then he added, even if the barrel is leaving the tchum of its owner. Now that's a problem. The beauty is that even though we're finishing ERUVIN, Mesechtas Beitza is coming up. So many of these dinim we're coming back to it. So Baruch Hashem. In Beya, that is where we learned the din of Tchumen, that what? That habehema, the hakelim, the Mishnah. Kiragle haba'olim, that means that they are bound to the same Tchum limitations as is their owners. So I get it, you're not carrying, you don't even need a reason to find a heter. If you're passing and no one is taking it more than daladamas, lechatchila you're good. But how can you do it chutz l'tchum? Does he argue with that Mishnah? So Amar Reish Lakish, in the name of the elder Levi, Mishum Levi Sava, that hacha b'mayaskino, that our Mishnah is speaking about b'ma'aran mechavis lechavis, which means that I own a barrel, you own a barrel, another person owns a barrel. My barrel is bound to where I'm going. What needed to be transported is not the barrel. You need the barrel because how else will you transport the liquid, the mayim in it? The mayim has to be taken over there. Now, what about the mayim? What about who owns the mayim? We'll get to that in a moment. The Mishnah is speaking about a case where no barrel is being transported beyond the tchum of the owner of the barrel. Rabbi Yehuda clearly says in the Mishnah that you can take it, right? Afilu chutz l'tchum. You know what you can take chutz l'tchum? The contents in the barrel will have to be poured from my barrel to your barrel, and you have a different tchum. Your tchum does allow you to go to the destination, so the barrel itself is not problematic. What did you accomplish with that? What about the water? So that was his chiddush of Levi Sava. Rabbi Yehuda l'taimei, the Amar Mayim ein bahem mamish. Another Mishnah in Beya. What's the Mishnah in Beya? Rabbi Yehuda poiter b'mayim. What is the Mishnah talking about? It's amazing. There's a woman, a yontif. She's needing a psachala. She's needing a piece of bread. She has the flour. She doesn't have water. So she goes to her shachan to get the water. Now this bread is made out of two ingredients: the flour from the woman who made it, and the water. But when Shabbos Yontav began, it belonged to the shachan. So the Tanach says if someone wants to carry this bread somewhere, it's bound not only by the tchum of the woman who baked the bread, it's bound by the owner of the flour and by the owner of the water, because part of it belongs to two different people. And that says Rabbi Yehuda know that the owner of the water and their tchum restrictions doesn't affect the bread. Because water inside a bread is considered completely insignificant. All we care about is who owns the bread or who owns the flour. And poiter b'mayim mipnei she'ein behem mamish. So now our Mishnah will follow that same sheet. And now the ERUVIN comes before Beya, but one is l'shitase the other. Only water, very good. So it's chavius, not of wine, not of beer, not of honey, not of oil, only of water. Only by water do we say mamish. Now, umay loy tahalach, right? Where do we have the words loy tahalach? These are words in the Mishnah that amru loy, the chachamim in our Mishnah at the end tells Rabbi Yehuda, loy sahalach zu, yoysim eragli balel. So says the Gemara, according to this interpretation of Levi Sava, let me find a place that Omai loy tahalach zu lo yahalech mashe bazu yosem raglei ba'olam. Zu, the whole. We're not even talking about the whole barrel. Yeah, we're good. That which is in this cannot go. They argue with Rabbi Yehuda. Mayim is considered something enough that it is bound to the tchum of its own. Okay. Frek the Gemara, wow, you're bringing me Levi Sava, the Mishnah in Beya Daf Lamed Zayin, when they put water inside a bread. How can you compare our case to that case when you may not compare them? He has a double question. Question number one is, Eibar neshamot leila Rabbi Yehuda, that water ain behem mamish, chevre heichad de belian beisa. Taka, when you put water in a dough, it's taka not discernible. What do you don't see the water. I'm not saying that you see the flour, but you see the bread which comes from the flour. The water is completely bottled. But however, heichad de isnu be'enei, which is where you're putting water in a barrel, mi shamat lei, and I'll prove to you, it's not question number two, I'll prove to you that Rabbi Yehuda's din in Beya is only by a loaf of bread. Because, what happens if there's a pot? I have meat and I need water. So I go to my shachin on Yom Tiv, I'm speaking Yom Tiv because on Shabbos he can't cook, and I say, can you please gift me some water, loan me some water, I'm getting your water. And I put water in my pot. Rabbi Yehuda there does not allow for this pot of food to go beyond the owner of the water's tchum. The water is absorbed in the meat. It's not exactly absorbed in the meat. What happens when you put water in a pot? You're not going to see water. You're going to see gravy. But gravy is like a gravy. It's dark. But it's distinct. It's not like water in a dough. Water becomes part of the dough. That Ashta B'Kdeira Amar Rebbe Yehuda. The Tan himself says that loy batli, because like we mentioned, so be'einayu batli. So now if the water's be'en, it's just in a different barrel. The Tanya, how do we know that Rabbi Yehuda holds that a Kedeira is not like the pas? It says clearly, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Mayim umelach b'teilim be'iso. However, ve'ein b'teilim b'Kdeira. Why? Mipnei roitva, because of its gravy. So the gravy is distinct. So Ella, therefore, because of that, we reject Levi Sava's explanation of our Mishnah, of our Rabbi Yehuda, and Ella Amarav Hache b'chaviyah shekonsa shvisa gavaldik umayim loy kanu shvisa askinon. Now we're going to have a good chazara of Hilchas Tchumen. One of the things that we learned about is that what acquires its own tchum when Shabbos comes in? Only something that's stationary. Remember, a mayim that's flowing. That was the whole kasha we had above. How can you b'chlal take the mayim out of a river? The mayim was beyond the tchum when Shabbos began. The answer is that since when Shabbos began, it itself was not stationary. It never acquired a tchum, and that is what we must be talking about. In other words, we're going to Levi Sava. You're not schlepping the barrel beyond. You're passing it over. The mayim before Shabbos began was not in any barrel. The water was only drawn on Shabbos, so it's a mayim sheleikanu shvisa askinon, and therefore. One second, stop. No, very good. So what's the chiddush? Take it back. He argues with Levi Sava. Since the mayim doesn't have a tchum, Rabbi Yehuda holds you don't have to pour out the mayim from my barrel to your barrel. My barrel belongs to me. My barrel theoretically is bound to my tchum. But when my barrel is in service of the water, because it's carrying the water, so my barrel becomes bottled to the mayim. And since it becomes bottled to the mayim, if and when which is the case of the Mishnah, when the mayim was not koine shvisa, so as long as that water is in this barrel need not be bound to my gavaldik, to my tchum, because we say the batla chavis legaba mayim. It's not about what's more expensive; it's about who is now servicing whom. The chavis is here to help you transport the water. Kiditnan, something similar. Not about tchumen, but about carrying. That hamoitzi hachai b'mito. By chai, we have this unusual dispensation, right? That chai noisas atzmei. So if you carry out a chai in a bed, I mean the rabbanan, you may not do it, but you're not violating the isur hoitzah midoiraisa. Hold on, only the chai is noisas atzmei. What about the bed? So we say pater, the last narrow line, afalamita, now that the chai, the ill person is on the bed, beautiful. So therefore, whatever you are allowed to do to the chai, right, you are allowed to do to the mita. Or similarly, another din, that hamoitzi yoicholin, so when it comes to b'chlal, by Yisuri Shabbos, you have shiurim. By yicholin, the shiur is a groigeres, a dried fig. What happens if a person carries oicholin less than this gregeres? So if they only would have been carrying the food, they certainly would not have been violating an isur doirais. It's asur, it's patur, aval asur, it's not chayiv. The din is that if you carry this oicholin pachos b'kashir big keli, you are patur af ala keli. Even though if you would have carried this keli by itself, you would have been chayiv. Why? The same thing over, beautiful. So you don't have to go that the water was poured michavis. L'chavis fakert. The Mishnah is speaking about a mayim. We're not koine shvisa, and the chiddush is that the chavis is betela to the mayim. Masiv Rabbi Yosef, it says in a braisa, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Bishayara, if you have a caravan of people and they spend Shabbos out there somewhere and they need to get water. Now water is mamash a need. So also we're lenient. So Noisin Adam, Chavius Lechavedoi, Vechavedoi Lechavedoi. And that's the way you'll bring water. Now this whole heter, this is our Rabbi Yehuda. L'cha'ura, that's only Bishayara. Shalai Bishayara Loi. And why not? Why not? What's the issue? Are you going to tell me you're going to draw water on Shabbos based on our explanation? Even not b'shayara. Chavis is bottled to the mayim. Ela amar Rabbi Yosef ki tanan nami b'masnisin b'shayara tanan. One answer is that when do you say that the chavis is bottled to the mayim? Only when there's an extra need to be mater that there's a shayara. But that's a doichik. Because it's mashma from our Mishnah that Rabbi Yehuda is trying to tell Rabbi Shimon that we are mater this chavera lechavera even if there is no need to be mater. So Abaye says indeed b'shayara they were even more lenient, which is the case of the Braisa. Afilu chavis shekansa shvisa umayim shekanu shvisa. You can't go beyond the tchum. Tchum is midrabanan, and if you are out there in the field on Shabbos and there is no water, we're mater for you. Our Mishnah is shaloi b'shayara. Shaloi b'shayara, there's still a leniency of Rabbi Yehuda, and that is like we explained, that even though the chavius was shekansa shvisa, since umayim shaleikanu shvisa, which is the case of the Mishnah, so we applied the concept of that the batla chavis legabe mayim. Chavis is the guf, right? The mayim is the neshama, and that's the way it is. The guf is battle to the neshama. Rav Ashi Omar, another way to explain Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah, that hache bechavi is the hefker askinan. Here the chavis is hefker. Guys, we had this machlokes above, whether items that are hefker, are they bechlal koine shvisa? From whom? Either from themselves or from the owner that acquired them, or no, they don't have a tchum. Chavis hefker askinon, umayim the hefker askinon. This is gavaldik, all right. And obviously, kum tochais that Rabbi Yehuda will subscribe to the shittas that hold that hefker does not acquire any makim shvisa. And the Chachamim at the seif of our Mishnah, who challenges Rabbi Yehuda, the Amrulai, that now we know will be, according to Rav Ashi's explanation, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nurihi, that said, we learned this above on Daf Mem Hey, on Daf Mem Zayin, we'll have this again in Beitza, the Amar Cheftzei Hefker Koinen Shvisa. Now again, what are the last words in the Mishnah of the Amrulai? Umay loiti halach zu yoyse meraglei haba'olim. It was Cheftzei Hefker. That's what they meant to say. In other words, that just because it was hefker, but those articles are bound to the tchum from where they were when Shabbos came in. And therefore they tell Rabbi Yehuda, you're not allowed to transport it, even using the chavere l'chavere. Okay. Chavre Baruch Hashem, we have time to begin the new Mishnah. This is dinim that we learned a lot in Masechta Shabbos. Means that you take an item that was completely stationary. We learned in the beginning of Masechta Shabbos it has to be noch al makim dalad al dalid. If not, it's not even considered stationary. That's called uprooting it. I think I just lost my connection. Let me go reconnect. I know how to do this with God's help. I apologize to the Chabad.org. Connecting. No internet.
Wi-Fi's pretty bad.
Connecting. I want to know one more time, and then we'll go back to the learning. Okay, enough game weiter. So says the Holy Mishnah, okay, so we said that a akira and a hanacha is defined only when the item was completely stationary. Now this is a hemshech in hamoitzi tefillin, because the first Mishnah gave you a heter, because we don't want to allow for holy articles to become desecrated. This will be the underlying reason why we're looking for a leniency here in our Mishnah. So says the Mishnah, if you're learning out of a sefer, the sefer then, all the svarim then, were in a scroll, not with two atzei hachayim, like we have in a sefer Torah, but think about a Megillah, and you're reading it al ha-iskufa. This will be a very important detail that we'll have to clarify in the Gemara. Iskufa means a threshold. The havamina now is that this threshold is a bona fide reshus hayachid. Why would that be? The threshold is an area that is closer to the house. It's like in between the reshus harabim and the house. It's like a little step up. If the step up is 10 tfachim, right, and it's 4 by 4 tfachim, then you got yourself a bona fide reshus ha-yachid. Okay, so you're reading the sefer on the iskufa, and if in his galgal hasefer meyadoi. V'nesgalgal hasefer does not mean the whole sefer. V'nesgalgal means that one end rolled out of your hand. So one part of the sefer is still in the Reshus HaYachid. That's the Havamina. The other end rolled onto the Reshus HaRabim. So says the Mishnah that goyluloi etzloi, you are allowed to bring it back towards yourself. What's pshat? Why are you allowed to do that? Even though midrabanan, you're not allowed to take something that's partially in the Reshus HaRabim to bring it back to the Reshus HaYachid, but here it's a sefer. Midoiraisa, you're not violating anything because it's not that the whole sefer fell into the Reshus HaRabim. So again, we are lenient. We put aside an Isur Derabanan. Oh, I'm reconnected. Let me go, Nachamol, connect over here. Let's go connect in again. Oh. Okay, Chavre, we're back. Okay, unmute. Can you hear? We're back in. If someone can send a WhatsApp that we're back in, that would be great. I hope you hear me over here. So Nachamol. So let's begin the Mishnah. Hoya koida ba sefer. If a person is reading a sefer, the sefer here is in a scroll. The scroll is like a Megillah, and you're reading it on the iskufa, on a threshold. Just repeating it for the Zoom audience over here. The threshold Havamina is a Reshus HaYachid. It rolled out of your hands. The nisgalgal hasefer miyadei, meaning that part of it is in your hand. The other part fell into the Reshus HaRabim, says the Mishnah, you are allowed to roll it back. Number one. Number one, midoiraisa, you're not violating anything because since it didn't fully land into the Reshus HaRabim, bringing it back, you're not lifting something up that was fully stationary. So there's no Isur Doiraisa. Midrabanan it's asur. But we're speaking about a sefer. What is your option? To leave the sefer unrolled in the Reshus HaRabim? It's not bachavadik. So they were lenient. Now the challenge with this pshat, we'll continue all this tomorrow, is that the next clause of the Mishnah seems to say the opposite. If you're reading on the roof, at the edge of the roof, now Reish Agag, again, it's a Reshus HaYachid. It sounds mamish like the same case. V'nisgalgal sefer miyadai, into where? Into the Reshus HaRabim. Again, v'nisgalgal. Here, the Mishnah doesn't say across the board, bring it back. Here, it depends. If it rolled you on the gag, if it didn't go into the ear space of the Reshus HaRabim, now the Reshus HaRabim only goes up 10 tfachim. Above 10 tfachim is a makim ptur, then goy lo yatzloi. However, mishi giya la'asara tfachim, here you may not. Again, this lochayda, the Gemara is mamash astira to what we learned before. We'll get to there in the Gemara. Hold on. Just because you can't bring it back in, well, you have to be machabed the sefer. So you do something to allow it to rest with the least amount of bizoyin, and that is hoifchay alaksav. You turn it upside down. You don't have the written words exposed up. You know, today, common in yeshivas, that's where I saw this. You go to the restroom in the middle of learning, you put a sefer on your sefer. You don't want to close it and have to open it. That's the concept of you're covering the written words. That's the way you are
Turning the sefer open on the table.
Turning the sefer on the table. That's what Shlomo is saying. I know, I'm just saying this. In other words, leaving it completely exposed is the least amount of kavod. And if you're hoifchay alaksav, then it's nicer. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. First of all, again, we're not using the heter we had in the beginning of the Mishnah. That, like we said, since it's not fully stationary, but he's not going into the above 10 to below 10 tfachim. He wants to know, Rabbi Yehuda, did it touch the ground or not? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, afilu ein mesulek min haaretz elik v'lo machat. Even if it's only a millimeter off the ground, the thickness of the edge of the needle, then still yes, goydoloi etzloi. But what is he saying in between the lines? But not if it touched the ground. And now we have the third shita. Rabbi Shimon Omer, afilo ba'aretz atzmai goydoloi etzloi. And why is that? She'ein lechad davar mishum shvuz ha'omer b'fnei kisvi ha'kodesh. That's exactly how we learned the pshat and the reisha. What we will have to clarify is, to be continued, what is the iskufa? Because if the iskufa is like we said at Reshus HaYachid, then why is it that when it comes to the gag, you have all these tanoim, and when it comes to the reisha, L'kula alma, it sounds like, you can bring it back in. All of that will be clarified, God willing, tomorrow in the shiur.